Hi and welcome to my channel. Today I am going to be talking about the extra costs of having a disability or a chronic illness or mental health issues, and I'm going to be giving you some advice and some tips on where you can find more information or where you could get a little bit of extra help. So being disabled, having a chronic illness, having mental health issues can cost you a lot of extra money. Anything from ranging to transport costs, parking costs at the hospital, medications, costs getting around, costs for, you might need adapted clothing, you might need an adapted home, you might need all sorts of things. The list really is endless, and I've talked to a few people this week about their extra costs, and the biggest extra cost for a lot of people was transport and parking. So parking at the hospital, transport to and from the hospital, transport to and from anywhere really. Transport does seem to be a really big issue. Now, there are a couple of things you can find to help you with transport costs. For example, if you are able to use buses or trains, there are disabled train cards and disabled bus passes. And head to your local council website for details on how to get a bus card. You can find details on train discount cards on train websites, so wherever your local train network is, check there. That's always worth your first look. As far as sort of parking costs at hospitals, because that does seem to be a big bugbear for a lot of people, check your local hospital. So I have two sort of local healthcare providers. One of them is the big main hospital where the A&E departments are, and the sort of the main outpatient departments, all big, that's where the big hospital is. They do not offer free parking for disabled people. There is parking which is sort of closer to the hospital than the other parking, and on some days there is a volunteer run sort of shuttle service from the parking to the main entrance. It's not always running, it's run by volunteers, so it's not terribly reliable. You can sometimes be waiting around in the rain as well. My local hospital offers free parking for a few things, so check your local hospital website for if you can get discounted parking or free parking or cheaper parking or alternative parking. It's worth a look. Obviously the big help out there is PIP or PIP, or what used to be DLA. Now, you can't see the news or read a newspaper these days without at least one story a day on the fundamentally flawed system that is PIP. I, a couple of years ago, had to change from my lifelong DLA award to, which is disability living allowance, to PIP, which is personal independence payments. I had to fill out another application form. I had to have an assessment. The assessment was not that scary. It's not as scary as some of the horror stories that you read. Me personally, it went fine. I was lucky I had a nice assessor. It wasn't too harrowing an experience. Once I was granted PIP, it was not granted indefinitely, so my lifelong debilitating disability went from being life awarded in DLA to being sort of 2 to 3 yearly reviewed on PIP. PIP also viewed me as less disabled, so my body has made a miraculous recovery between being assessed for DLA and PIP, meaning I lost around £100 a month, which has made a difference. It is quite stressful. The point of PIP, and I will quote from the Money Advice Service, personal independence payment, or PIP, is a benefit that helps with the extra cost of a long-term health condition or disability for people aged 16 or over. So what I glean from that is This money is to help me with extra costs. For some people that's things like carers or enablers or befrienders or mobility aids, prescriptions. It can cover a multitude of things, anything that your disability or lifelong condition needs extra help. So I use my PIP or PIP for taxis to and from work. For various reasons I'm not going to go into, the only way I can get to work is via a taxi. I use one of the cheaper taxi services in my area. I am lucky in that they're all really great. I've only had an unpleasant driver once or twice. They're a good price, they're competitive, they're sometimes late, but we are experiencing some taxi issues in the city at the moment. So I get 8 taxis a week, so that's 4 for 4 mornings and 4 for 4 evenings. My taxi service also charges for being sat in traffic. I travel to and from work at the 2 busiest times of the day, so I always pay slightly more than you would in the middle of the day. Those 8 taxis cost me more than £400 a month. My PIP is just over £300 a month. That's an extra £100 I have to find out of my quite limited wages, on top of my contribution to our joint account, which pays for our mortgage and our bills. That has to pay for our food shopping. Obviously it's a joint account, we both contribute towards it, but I have the added guilt that I cannot contribute as much towards it because I'm having to pay over and above my PIP to pay for my taxis to get to work. I cannot explain how frustrating that is, that I want to work, I want to go to work, I want to get out of the house, I want to be busy, I don't want to let my disability hold me back. But because I choose to work, I pay in benefits. I do not get the benefits. I don't want to say the benefits I deserve, but I would get more if I didn't work. So by choosing to work, I am out of pocket. Now, I am lucky that I can go to work. I know that I'm lucky that I have a job. But it's really frustrating that I am penalised because I'm disabled, because I have to get taxis to work and my PIP doesn't cover it. It's so frustrating. And I spoke to quite a few people whose PIP doesn't cover their costs to and from work, doesn't cover their transport costs to hospitals. And that's scary. That means that there are people not going to hospital appointments, not going out, not leaving the house because they can't afford to get out, they can't afford to use a taxi, they maybe can't use buses, the buses aren't accessible or they're not in an accessible area. So there are people stuck in their houses because they don't have enough money, and that's really frightening. So again, PIP is a set in stone process now. It is being looked at. You do read a lot of articles about how they're going to overhaul the system again, how they're looking at it, they're going to do better. Lots of appeals are being fought and people are getting the benefits they deserve. But you do unfortunately read a huge amount of articles where people are dying, actually dying, because they had their money taken off of them and they couldn't afford to live anymore. And that's disgusting. If you fit certain criteria, there is such a thing as an access to work grant. You can find information about this on the gov.uk website. Access to work basically is help with transport costs to and from work, but it has quite a strict criteria. You have to fit the eligibility to get the access to work grant. It is a little bit tricky to get, and I think you have to work a minimum amount of hours, and I think it is also means tested. So definitely check out the gov.uk website for information on access to work. It's really useful. Speaking of work, it is really important to note that under the Equality Act 2010, you are entitled to reasonable adjustments in the workplace. Your employer has a right to make reasonable adjustments. I've written a huge information resource which I'm going to link below, where I talk about what your employer has to do for you. So under the Equality Act 2010, which is an incredibly important document, definitely refer to that all the time. It really scares people. Your employer has a duty to provide a reasonable adjustment in order for you to carry out your work. Reasonable adjustments can be classed as changes to certain policies. For example, sickness policies, if you have to have a lot of time off for appointments or sickness due to a disability or a chronic illness or a mental health condition, as long as it is covered under the Disability Act, or the Equality Act as it is now called, they have a duty to ensure that you don't have to make that time up or lose hours or lose wages because you go to those hospital appointments. So as long as it's covered by the Equality Act, you can ask for that reasonable adjustment, and they have a duty to provide that for you. They also have a duty to provide changes to working practices, physical layouts, or providing extra equipment or support to make your job easier to do. Your employer should not ask you to pay for any adjustments that need to be made, and if they don't make those adjustments or refuse to make those adjustments or fob you off, then that is discrimination, and you can complain, you can take them to a tribunal, you can take them to your union, you can report them. There are all sorts of things that you can do. So certainly bear that in mind if you are in a workplace and you need extra support, you need time off for appointments, you need time off because you're sick, because of your disability, then definitely make sure that you have a reasonable adjustment in place. That's my top tip. Your local council can also be a really good resource for information, so check out your local council to find out things like the Disabled Facilities Grant, which is a grant of up to £30,000 for adjustments in your home, so things like level access, ramps, stair lifts, wet rooms, sort of all that sort of thing. They are dependent on some benefits. You might have to contribute towards some of the work, so definitely check that out when you apply, and you have to sort of conform to obviously standards an architect might have to visit. You generally don't get to pick the contractor, and they might make you undergo an OT assessment, so bear all that in mind. But the Disabled Facilities Grant is a really good resource that you can tap into if you need an adjustment in your home to make your home livable. So this applies to people that own their own homes, council homes, and if you have a private landlord or tenant, you can also apply for the Disabled Facilities Grant, so don't let that put you off if you're in rented accommodation. Your local council is also the best place to go to find out where your disabled car parks are in the area. Generally, you'll also be able to find out if you have to pay or not in those car parks. They can also have lists of accessible areas, especially sort of council owned, so for example our local swimming pool, council buildings, all that sort of thing. There's information on there if they're accessible for you, so definitely check out your local council. They can be a really good resource. You can also apply through your local council for things like helping with getting the bins in and out. There are also grants, garden maintenance grants. There are all sorts of resources on your local council's website, so definitely check that out. I have spoken to people who use a lot of extra water for various reasons. They might need to do more clothes washing, bedding washing. They might need to take baths instead of showers. They might need a lot of water for a medical procedure. There are all sorts of reasons that people might need more water, and you can apply to your local water provider for a capped water meter. So the meter, the price you'll pay is capped at what they class as the average household water bill. It's capped at that level, and if you use more water than that, for whatever reason, you won't pay more than the average household bill. So that can save a lot of money, and it stops people from not using water, not drinking water, not showering, not bathing, because they think they're going to have to pay a lot more because they're using all that extra water, especially on a water meter. So definitely look into your local water provider for that information. It's a really good perk basically. As well as water bills, there are grants that can help you with utility bills, so your electricity, your gas. There are charities out there that can help you with that, and again, search your local council website for that, or your local or national, I suppose, gas or electricity supplier. Those are really good ones to check out. Some of the people I spoke to talked about grocery shopping costs. So I've spoken to people who suffer from obsessive compulsive disorder and have to have prepackaged vegetables. I use prepackaged vegetables because I cannot stand for long periods of time, so peeling and chopping vegetables is a strain on my body, so I use pre-packed vegetables. As an added bonus, the plastic police will be on your case all the time about how you're killing the environment. The plastic police are buggers for ableism. If you need to use pre-packaged veg, use it and hope that they never have to. Good for them. They don't cry because they've had to stand up for 10 minutes peeling a potato. Good for them. Anyway, off topic slightly. Things like prepackaged vegetables cost a lot more, so your grocery shopping can go up. And that there isn't really help out there for that sort of thing. But there are things you can do. You can look for discounts, you can check supermarket comparison websites to see where the best discount is for the things that you want to buy. Make sure you look out for the yellow stickered items in supermarkets. They are considerably cheaper. So always check for discounts in your local supermarket. Get Tesco club cards, get Nectar points. Use those points that you get from your shopping to use towards your shopping the next time. At Sainsbury's, you have a Nectar card, you have a Tesco club card, and they all add towards points which you can then use for things like going to the cinema, not just your food shopping, so bear that in mind. There are hundreds of disability charities, mental illness charities, chronic illness charities. There are hundreds of them out there. In my information guide, I have linked to a website where you can basically search for and look at them all. These charities, they're often local. The local charities often have the resources to offer grants towards holidays, towards days out, towards food costs. There are all sorts of things that these local charities can help you with. I have a very good friend who has found some wonderful local charities that have really helped her and her disabled son out. So definitely check out all the charities that are in your local area to see what they can do for you. And it's not just about the discounts and the money that you might get, it's about the support and the advice and the information that these local charities can offer you. Often a local charity is headed by someone that has a real insight into a disability or a chronic illness, so they really know what they're talking about and they can really fight to get you the best information, the best support that you need. So local charities are a really, really good bet. As well as local charities and national charities, there are also a lot of funding grants out there. So again, I've linked another website below where you can search for all sorts of different grants, from holidays to clothes, to help getting to job interviews, to help getting into work, to just anything you can imagine. There is a grant for it. So search on that website that I've linked in my resource to find the best grants for you. I know people that have been able to go on holiday, they've been able to take their disabled child on holiday, they've been able to go on holiday themselves. There are so many grants out there just waiting for you to use their money to give you a better quality of life. So definitely check out those grants, they're fantastic. Another really good untapped resource are your community workers. So if, for example, you have a social worker or a CPN or a community nurse, a district nurse, anything like that, a health visitor even, they often will have access to a lot of information and resources that you might not know about. They can offer you things like Meals on Wheels. There are all sorts of things that they can offer you that aren't generally known, so it's a really good resource to tap into. So definitely ask your community workers, your community healthcare workers, if they know of anything that might help. They might know of support groups that can help you. For example, my local fire service offers a service where they will give you free smoke alarms, free carbon monoxide detectors, free safe fire blankets. If you fit certain criteria, for example, limited mobility, disabilities, if you are over a certain age, if you're a single parent, they will come and fit all those things for free and test them every year, which if you're disabled and you live alone, that might not be something you can do for yourself. So actually having that local resource of your fire service coming out to essentially save your life is a really good thing to know about. So definitely speak to your community healthcare workers, speak to your local fire service, and just find out what is there for you, because a lot of local areas will have tons of support for you. People just don't tell you about it. So definitely check those out. I want to take a minute to talk about carers. You might be a carer or you might have a carer. There are resources out there for carers as well. So support groups, information, advice, benefits, grants. I've linked a website to a huge hub of carers information. So look after your carers. If you're a carer yourself, you are doing a wonderful job and you are deeply appreciated. So check out those resources and make sure that you are staying healthy and safe and sane. Make sure you're getting the advice and the support that you need as well. Wheelchair users might often experience extra wear and tear on their clothes, so they have to replace their clothes more often, which leads to an extra cost which isn't accounted for anywhere else. We don't get clothing discount on clothes, we don't get money towards our clothes. If we're lucky enough to get a benefit, we might be able to spend that on a new t-shirt because our old one has experienced wear and tear, but that's provided we've already paid for all the other costs that we have to pay for. So that can be really frustrating, and it's things like that that there isn't really any help for us when that's not accommodated for when you're filling out your PIP form. That's not taken into consideration, that you might need to buy extra pants because you continuously wet yourself or anything like that. You know, it's really stressful being disabled. It's really stressful having a chronic illness. It's really stressful having a mental illness. And there are so many extra costs involved that people don't think about, like clothes, like I don't know, things like mobility aids. Whilst they are available on the NHS in some circumstances, unless you have an official diagnosed condition, you cannot have a mobility aid, and that is frustrating. So you have to buy your own. So quite often you're going to have to pay, if you want a decent quality wheelchair or a decent quality mobility aid, you're going to have to pay for it yourself. Even if you are lucky enough to get it on the NHS, you're getting the most basic, cheapest item that they have found for you. Whilst fit for purpose, because it has to be, it might not be the best quality, it might not be aesthetically pleasing, so you're going to have to pay for those things yourself. And it breaks my heart that people have to raise GoFundMes or ask people to donate to them in order to buy wheelchairs. That shouldn't be a thing. That should not be a thing. And whilst we are so lucky in the UK that we have the NHS and that we can, for the most part, have these things paid for us, I hate to think the costs that some people in other countries must face if they need a wheelchair. So we are really lucky here, but there are extra costs involved still. For example, I have heard stories where taxi firms have charged extra because you need a wheelchair accessible taxi. There's been a lot of stories in the news lately about Uber and Lyft drivers not accepting assistance dogs or charging extra because you've got an assistance dog. What is that about? As if we wanted to be treated as subhuman, as if we don't have enough going on, and enough to pay out for, and enough stress in our lives, that we are then also treated as subhuman. It's disgusting. My last sort of big place to go, my last two big places to go for information and advice are the Citizens Advice Bureau and gov.uk. Now, whilst the government is a bit of a frigging nightmare, gov.uk is a wealth of information. You can find all sorts of information guides, from applying for a blue badge, applying for PIP, how to get a rail card, how to get a bus card, how to apply for access to work grants, plane travel, train travel, bus travel. They've got the lot. So definitely check out the gov.uk website for information. They can often point you in the right direction. They can make you think of things that you might not have thought about in terms of your disability and what help is there out there for you. So definitely check that out. The Citizens Advice Bureau is another great source of information, and your local Citizens Advice Bureau can help you with things like applying for grants or applying for PIP. So definitely check out the Citizens Advice Bureau and definitely look into your local Citizens Advice Bureau. I've used them to write DLA applications in the past. I've used them for support to get to work. I've used them for all sorts of things. So they are a really great resource to have. Definitely check them out. In the comments below, let me know what your extra costs are. Have you used any of the resources I've talked about? Do you find in your area that there are a lack of resources? I'd love to hear from you. If you liked this video, then please give me a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe. You can find all of my latest blog posts at www.estellasaurus.co.uk, and in the box below I have linked my information resource guide, which is just a little fact sheet that I put together with some useful websites that will help you see what's out there for you, see what help there is with extra costs, see what you can get money for, what you can apply for, what local charities there are. So please, please, please check out my resource. And I can also email you a copy of the information sheet if you would prefer to read it that way or prefer to have it to hand to keep. So you can email me for a copy at estellasaurus@outlook.com, and I will pop my email address below as well should you wish to have a copy of my resource guide. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back soon. Bye.